Oh, that question, obviously, it is quite clear that such a catastrophe, because we have so many major powers. We have 5 standard nuclear weapon states, but we have another group of states, the North Korea, India, Pakistan, Israel, and maybe others who have nuclear weapons. And the question is, with those enormous quantities of weapons, of course, the potential for a nuclear catastrophe is quite obvious. There is no real blockage because the weapons are there, they are usable, there is no problem for any of these 9 states to activate their bombs or nuclear capabilities. So it is obvious that the nuclear catastrophe is possible. And we also know the consequences. We can imagine the consequences of this news. Then there's the question, how probable is nuclear catastrophe? I would say it is possible. As long as it's possible, even if we have to be naive and optimists and believe it's not probable, but definitely it's possible. Oh, that is a long list, I would say. One could start from very modest steps to more, so to say, difficult ones. What I think one should, to start with, one could say, take the nuclear weapons off alert. That's an immediate threat we have because of the accident potentials linked to the alert policy of the major powers, not the least the US and Russia. Also, of course, one must remove these weapons from delivery vehicles, so separate them from the missiles or from the bombs. That is, of course, the second very important step. Of course, one has to end the deployment of non-strategic nuclear weapons. We now see a tendency, a very fast-moving tendency to add nuclear capabilities to conventional forces in support of ordinary armies. This matter of tactical nuclear weapons are becoming, so to say, part of strategic thinking. If you are losing in a conventional conflict, you will put in your tactical nuclear weapons. It's already there. So one has to end deployment of these non-strategic nuclear weapons. And then, of course, diplomacy. US, Russia should pursue negotiations on nuclear weapons issues. Of course, we have now the START treaty to extend it for another 5 years. And but there are also other issues. And for me, it is the issue also of INF treaty. We recall that President Trump, so to say, decided to leave that treaty, and it appears that President Putin has more or less gladly joined him, that the INF treaty, which is so important for the Europeans. It is, that treaty was created as a sort of guarantee against a nuclear war focused upon Europe. But now that treaty is probably dead, and that increases the risk for conflict. So that is, I think, the most important things. Of course, there is no first use undertakings, but and that is important. There was a fundamentally such agreement once, long time ago, with President Gorbachev and Reagan, and that is a sort of no first use undertaking should be realized again. I don't think it's enough. I don't think any use should be agreed upon, but now we talk about real practical things, what to do. And there is to come back and confirm the no first use in relation to also to non-nuclear weapon states, no use against non-weapon states, and no first use against another nuclear weapon state. Yeah, so these are, I would say, very modest steps. I would like to go further, but to answer your question, I think there we have at least some immediate steps to be taken. Well, I'm not in agreement. Yes, of course, immediately when Hiroshima and Nagasaki came, and the Soviet Union speedily acquired nuclear weapons. But we know that in the Korean War, for instance, the American military senior officers wanted to use nuclear weapons in that conflict. Also in the Vietnam War, some military wanted that. So, but there we at least can say that the political leadership in the US in this case abstained from going that far. It was a fear, but I must say, I think there is strong reason today to fear. We will come back to issues not only in the two major nuclear weapons powers, but we will come back to issues like the Middle East, where I see a growing threat for use of nuclear weapons. We will come back to that, I guess, when we will discuss that situation there. So I think the risk of nuclear weapons we should really be deeply concerned that this is a matter of present threat. And I agree with the nuclear clock people who say we just talk about minutes to a nuclear catastrophe, a nuclear war. I think we should not be naive and believe that this cannot happen. So this is strong reason to be concerned today. Absolutely, I think that is definitely possible. Yes, we can, because as we always said, any use would be catastrophic. The consequences of a war would be so serious, and we will come back to that again. The risks are so high, so we must make the elimination nuclear weapons thing a realistic thing. And we have leaders in our countries who understand that and ready to take the responsibility for so to say, getting rid of the nuclear weapons and eliminate the risk for conflict. The consequences of conflicts are so disturbing. I mean, it is the existence of humanity which are threatened. I think this is forgotten. The analysis we have done, I guess we come back to that question, but anyhow, I think it is very, very important, and it is also possible, because when we start to understand the consequences, catastrophic destruction, we will, so to say, manage to engage not only politicians, but the general public, the peoples, to more actively engaged in the policy for eliminating nuclear weapons and practically eliminate the risks of a nuclear conflict. So there, concerning nuclear arms, it's quite obvious it should not be any nuclear weapons in Europe. And again, we have the INF Treaty, which then President Trump decided to leave. The INF Treaty was a tremendous blessing for both Russia and then Soviet Union when it was adopted, and the Europeans, because it took away the risk of sort of an isolated nuclear war, where for instance, the United States could escape, so to say, the risk of being hit by return attacks. So it was when the ILF treaty was adopted, I think it was a triumph for smart thinking, intelligent thinking. And the sad thing is now that thanks to the Trump initiative, this treaty will be abandoned. And that means increased risks for the whole European continent in both directions, both in Western Russia and in Germany, Sweden, Holland, Belgium, and so on. So I think that is very, very difficult. There should be no nuclear arms in Europe. Concerning the anti-missile defense system, it's much more complex. The West, I think the Americans now tell us when we ask about their anti-ballistic missiles system, they say it's not against Russia, it's linked against Iranian nuclear weapons or other developments in the Middle East. But it is not an easy issue, the anti-ballistic missile arrangement. But the nuclear presence in Europe is absolutely simple. They should be eliminated immediately, and the INF treaty should be restored and even developed further and strengthened, but it should come back. Well, I think this is very unfortunate steps. I don't know why they have done it. It has been very hastily processed and just hanged out to a surprise for the international community. And I think it is a very unwise decision by the Brits. The numbers they have had before is enough for destruction, tremendous destruction. And so it is a little of a shock to us that they came out without any consultation, without any explanation, really. It is unfortunately a setback. Maybe they have an old system, I don't know why, and they would get rid of their old system and put in new stuff, but still, this is a setback for all of us who are working for development, of safety and security in the European region, but also in the global context. Yes, more so, absolutely. And I think the decision by the Trump administration has made it dangerous for everyone in the Middle East. I think it is harmful for everyone. We hope that the administration in Iran, and that they will in a few weeks' time have their election, and we don't know the fallout of that. But even the present leadership in Iran is, of course, hit by the destruction or the elimination of the JCPOA agreement, because if it is destroyed, it's quite clear that there is a risk that the new leadership in Iran will expand the nuclear weapons program. And they will do that. And the consequences, I think, will be crystal clear. Israel will continue to expand on it. I think there is a high risk on my own conversations and meeting in the Middle East that Saudi Arabia, for instance, will move in that direction. When I asked the Saudis, how can you do that? They answered, well, we will have technology provided us from friendly countries. I think they have in mind Pakistan. We will be able, and if Iran acquires nuclear weapon, we must have nuclear weapons. I don't know how Egypt is reacting to this, but I know how Saudi Arabia will react. And certainly the Israeli situation is clear. So this is the most dangerous development. I think it's the most self-destructive decision taken by a state leader, like when Trump destroyed or went against the JCPOA, which is otherwise the most interesting and most creative and well thought through deal. But now Iran may require nuclear weapons. They are on their way. The new administration may be a hardliner compared with the present careful policy directed by, among others, Ambassador Foreign Minister Zarif. But the hope is that we can convince you, all of us, but especially the parties to the JCPOA treaty, that they really get together now and try to restore the JCPOA treaty, a major, so to say, contribution to international security. So this is extremely important. Well, I mean, this is extremely challenging for the US. But they are helped by a very constructive approach by South Korea, trying to look for finding solutions to the security situation on the Korean Peninsula, and also the role China is playing. But what I think is that for the United States, North Korea is very, very dangerous, because what we have found, what US has found, is that North Korea has developed missiles, strategic missiles, which appear to be able to reach US West Coast. So it can be a catastrophic consequence for US, certainly for North Korea also, if they make use of that capability. But I think if I was advisor to President Biden, I would put North Korea very high up on the agenda and in a constructive manner, start to really develop a creative diplomacy on the region, especially as it is, I think, a relatively stable and wise leadership in South Korea. And also maybe China, for once, could be helpful here diplomatically. But it is so important, and I think for US itself, its own security, they have to be very, very careful in handling the North Korean situation. Well, of course, because of nuclear use, so nuclear weapons, as we said before, is so destructive. Even nuclear terrorism is good dangerous, but we must also see nuclear, it is technically, it's complicated. I think it's still relatively well-functioning international system with regard to fissile material and to get access to highly enriched uranium, plutonium, and so on. So I'm not terribly scared. As I said, everything nuclear is dangerous. But in the case, it's not easy for terrorists here, because here we have no matter what country you are living in, you are very concerned about nuclear terrorism. And I think there is relatively well-functioning operations going on, including with the strengthening of the IAEA capabilities and the so to say additional protocol added to the ordinary strategic arrangements, the Iran arrangements. There I feel that there is a risk. Everything within a nuclear is risky, but I'm not so seriously concerned. I doubt that it would be possible for terrorists really to acquire that type of destructive capabilities. So I'm quietly optimistic with regard to terrorism, not in other aspects, but with regard to the nuclear threat. Yes, of course, with regard to space weapons, obviously it's clear that there is a risk, and cyber technology complicates deterrence policy tremendously. I mean, that is the whole security, especially if you take the relations US-Russia. Cyber can, so to say, destroy and create quite dangerous, unsecure situations. And you can, deterrence policies can be, so to say, I'm not a great friend of deterrence policy, but I accept that as a real part of the real world. But cyber may also undercut the deterrence strategies. And so it's extremely important that the major nuclear states, especially US and Russia, cooperate on handling the cyber matter, and not allow that to confuse and mislead decision makers in any of these capitals. But of course, we should, all states should be very careful about cyber, but the deterrence policy is threatened a lot by cyber technology. But we, of course, I think we are developing countermeasures also. And we should do, it's possible to do that, I think, to protect against such missteps which will come out from misleading signal system. So I trust that the states will cooperate, because it's a common interest to not be misled by the cyber misuse. But it exists as a dear problem. That is another type of problems. And there, the rational thing is to get together here and to work together and develop, use what we have. We have international arrangements, the UN cooperation, and we should make good use of these things, because here we have common interests. There is no interest against state. On the contrary, we are all happy if everyone is succeeding, and we should cooperate. We should be more effective in cooperation with the vaccines and with data information and so on. But I think that is some very good functioning capabilities here, and I'm not seriously concerned about that. Much more different with nuclear issues.